Concentrate is my fifth venture-backed startup. 4 exits prior. Arguably, no other marketable skills.
I just want to focus first on that pivot. So it's a critical point getting that product market fit.
The pivot wasn't because it wasn't going to be profitable. It was because it wasn't going to be big enough.
How do you ensure that you keep that going and don't get distracted? Building product or focusing on some other part of the business.
We decide, to be crazy enough to do one of these things, and it all comes from the heart first, and then the head.
Since you are in the CEO role, I was curious what does make it a very effective CEO? Like what is it day to day or strategically that you focus on?
Talk about AI until the cows come home, but we still need people to build businesses and to, sell to other companies and to create partnerships.
Okay, hey Ari, welcome to my startup podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Brendan.
Your current startup, I mean, it deals with the management of AIs. So if a company like my own startup, which is selecting voice assistants to call the insurance company, needs to manage that, then they can use your service. And I want to dive into that because especially because it is so relevant to what I'm working on. But before we go into that, do you mind if we just talk a bit about your background? Where you're from? How'd you get into the startup space? I know you're a serial entrepreneur, so I'm curious, kind of if there's a through line there. But yeah, just start off with some background, and then we can go from there eventually to your current work.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I grew up in Bethesda, Maryland, right outside of DC. Went to college in DC. Moved to New York about 23 years ago. Something about a girl. Concentrate is my fifth venture-backed startup. It's my fourth with the same business partner. We've worked together, Todd Lieberman and I for over 20 years. First startup was my dorm room, newsletters.com. And then we followed that up, Todd and I, with Voice Star, Solve Media, Circulate, Deduce, and now Concentrate AI. So fifth startup, 4 exits prior, arguably no other marketable skills.
And 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 how did you? Is there a through line between these startups? Like, did you find that the skills from each one built on the next, and that's how you're able to leverage them in order to continually start successful startups? How does that work? Or do you find like it entirely? I know that there are some common themes like cybersecurity for AI and now on to uh LLMs and selecting them. But yeah, is there a through line that you pay attention to?
Yeah, there are a couple of through lines here. I would say we've done a lot of cybersecurity work. We've done a lot of identity security in particular, which gets to compliance and governance at Concentrate. We've done a lot of aggregation, particularly aggregating the supply side of industries. And those are the through lines you'll find at Concentrate. We tend to work with the same folks over and over again. And when that works, it's phenomenal. You get a great culture.
So when you say aggregating the supply side, I'm trying to picture what exactly that means. So I guess I know one of your past ventures was detecting like AI fraud. When you say supply side in that case, is it who is the supplier or what is being supplied?
Yeah. So at newsletters, we aggregated, all the print publications,
Okay, I see.
and at Solve Media, we aggregated, all of the CAPTCHA inventory,
Mm,
and at Deduce, we aggregated the world's largest identity graph, and at Concentrate, we've aggregated all of the LLM suppliers and models.
got it. And so you found that at the end of each startup, there's been a good network that you've been left with that's allowed you to jump into the next startup, and it doesn't compete with the previous one. I mean, do you find that so you don't run into any non-compete issues there? I guess you kind of go into the same space, but a different kind of a different product.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to unpack there. I
Yeah,
mean, the first is, every startup provides the opportunity to work with, some of the great people you've worked with in
yeah,
the
yeah.
past, and some new people that you had a great experience with that you wish to work with in the future. Just on the talent front, you also wind up working with clients and trading partners that you aspire to work with again because you had such a good experience, and there's carryover value there, right? And then just the learnings from one startup to another, what to do, what not to do, what worked, what didn't work. A lot of times that becomes transferable. So I've been doing this for a long time, startups in general, and really they're substantially more lucrative ways to make a living and probably healthier ways to make a living.
Yes,
But if you do plan to make a career out of it, you'll want to carry forward talent and learnings and the like.
got it, got it. I'll take that note down. Um, all right, so that brings us to concentrate. Um, so you started multiple startups at that point, right before you started concentrate. How did you decide on the product for concentrate? Did it roll in naturally? Did you have to do a lot of market research?
Um, it's interesting. At my previous company, we tried to do a bunch of work with LLMs. It was very early in the cycle. It was rather unsuccessful. And we were determined to add some stability for other companies, that were to come. And we've accomplished that at Concentrate in the form of multi-cloud resiliency. But we didn't start out as Concentrate. We started out building our own GPU cloud,
Hmm.
and quickly determined, that wasn't going to be the business. People were asking questions like, what model should we use in this particular industry, in this particular workflow to solve this particular business need or problem?
Yeah.
And then they were asking, and if we use multiple models, like, what's the best way to do that? How do I see it all like in one place? And how do we know that we're budgeting for it properly? And how do we do those things without it becoming like a very intense job that nobody signed up for? And you know, how do we govern it, right? Like, how do we handle the compliance around it, the privacy, the security, especially with so many laws coming into effect this year and next year, coming from from every state capital in the US. Like,
Uh-huh.
how do we manage this
Yeah.
this crazy new world? And so Todd and I looked at each other and said, like, okay, that's the business. Let's go build that business. And that's concentrating.
Absolutely, and so many points there that I want to dive into, but I just want to focus first on that pivot. So, how do you? I mean, it's a critical point getting that product market fit, and a big part of that is keeping that tight customer feedback loop going. How do you ensure that you keep that going and don't get distracted? Building product or focusing on some other part of the business. Do you make sure? Do you have a rule to schedule weekly meetings or daily meetings?
The GPU cloud that we built was profitable.
Okay.
And so we could have grown it. We just didn't think it was scalable
Okay,
at
I see.
the at the le- at the level we aspired to. So, when we want to build businesses, it's really about, can we add some significant value to the industry, to the world? Can we do a good thing?
Yeah,
Um, and then it's like, well, can it be a good business? And what's the definition of a good business? Like, can it scale? Can it be venture backable? Right? Can it be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue or billions of dollars in revenue? And we want to answer all those questions. And, we've got this like long checklist that we look at every time, we decide, to be crazy enough to do one of these things. And it all comes from the heart first, and then the head,
Mm,
and then it's debated. Um, but the pivot wasn't because it wasn't going to be profitable. It was because it wasn't going to be big enough,
I see.
and it wasn't gonna be interesting enough, and it wasn't going to solve major problems that existed in the space today, like concentrate does. And so that kind of ideation process and the feedback loops, plural, come from just constant
Yeah,
conversation, prospective customers and trading partners and suppliers, and these are small private companies and executives at huge companies, and just going, hey, what do you think about this, what do you think about this, and then quarter turns until you kind of hit an area that's ripe where people go, yeah, like that's a pain point for us, like, yeah, that's a problem, like if you could solve that problem, we would be a customer of that, like we would pay. You listen for that kind of pain, like, oh, if you could solve that, we would pay you a lot for that, like, can we
right.
have that tomorrow, is like something that you want to hear,
Yeah,
unless you're hearing it, unless you're hearing that kind of thing. It's hard to get excited about wanting to accelerate into that kind of business. So when we were building a GPU cloud, people were like, great, bare metal, you know I could go to Amazon AWS, which is a phenomenal company and
uh,
partner. I could go to Oracle. Like, we were like, we're not going to compete with those
right,
guys.
right.
That's just, that's just so silly. It
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense. And even if we did, like, what good does that do the industry? We were substantially more excited about, reg tech, right? Like GRC work, governance, risk mitigation, compliance. These things are not, the sexiest things for most people, but we love them.
yeah. That's they always say that's often where the good startup ideas. These boring, tedious areas that no one likes to do. So they like to automate them, and but no one likes to work on them because they're tedious and boring. Um, yeah. So I mean, when you're going into these meetings, you're constantly meeting with the customer, with stakeholders. Are you bringing in is your co-founder attending them as well as a technical perspective, or is he mostly focusing on the products? Like, to what extent are you is both the technical team and the business side meeting with the customer?
Yeah, a lot. I
A
mean,
lot, yeah.
so 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 Todd is our co-founder,
Uh,
CTO, incredibly technical
yeah.
guy, but also has a great business head on his
Uh,
shoulders. I'm substantially more limited, now with the Claude codes of the world, like I can actually do things I couldn't do before, but he's substantially more well-rounded, I would say. And both of us were involved, and are still involved in many, many, many of the conversations. Like, of course, I can't monopolize his time such that he can't build the products with his team,
right.
that he needs to build. But the feedback loop is critical, right?
Yeah.
Build, deploy, use, feedback, right? Build again, right? That loop, where you're listening for feature requests, you're understanding how people use it, what they don't care about, where stuff is broken. And so, Todd is actively involved on the business side, you know, as he is in running the dev team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you hear a lot of talk these days about forward deployed engineers and really being down there in the weeds, knowing what the problems are, what the workflows are. So that makes sense. That's work for you guys. Um, and yeah, so moving on to your product, I mean, managing AI. I mean, there's so many points to that are coming up now. People are realizing that they can't just use AI and assume that they're getting value out of it. That's worth more than the cost of AI. There's incredibly high costs, and just because they're using an intelligent assistant doesn't mean that it's applying that intelligence to create value to the company, right? So how do you guys if you want to start with one of those, maybe cost, how do you guys manage costs and present that to the user so they can get the most out of it?
Yeah, I'll give you an overview on concentrate,
Sure. Yeah.
which will give you, that'll give you a sense of of the spend management component of what we do, which is part, not all of what we do. But Concentrate really brings all of the models, all of the frontier models, all the open source models under one roof, and normalizes them all so that a developer, or anyone who can use an API, even in Cloud Code or Cursor, can gain access to all of those models without having to talk to them differently. So they're all normalized on the same standard, which is the OpenAI API standard, and that makes life a lot easier for a developer. That means that she can experiment with any model she chooses back and forth. She does not have to, get in a rut with one particular vendor or sign a big expensive contract, as these companies put out new models and leapfrog each other with respect to what's state of the art. Um, and so we save enormous amounts of time and money for developers in that way. And then, because we've got all the models in one place, then we wrap them in governance and risk mitigation and compliance. And so, what you'll see from us is everything from uh very high end identity security to ZDR endpoints from, 7 or 8 providers to immutable audit trails and CRUD logs. Obviously we're SOC 2, and we've got roles based access controls. And that, by the way, gets to spend management because you can have as many keys as you want with our system, and a key in your business could be a customer, or it could be a developer, or it could be an agent, or it could be a project. And all of them can have a specific budget, and all of them can use some models, but not other models. It just depends, what you want to do, what your specific requirements are. And then on top of that, we've got multi-cloud resiliency for everything. So maximum uptime,
Mm.
right? You can buy the same model, whether it's a frontier model or an open source model, on multiple clouds through Concentrate. And if there's too much latency or if there's downtime, you're not down. Just because a provider is down doesn't mean you'll be down. In fact, you'll be up. The rest of the market, everybody on X will be bitching that they're down. You won't be, and that's what Concentrate does.
There we go. And so have you guys found that there's a certain ICP, ideal customer, that has needed this product the most, or maybe a certain vertical, certain space?
It's interesting. We work a lot with native AI companies. They come from a bunch of different verticals. They tend to
Uh,
be buying tokens, LLM tokens, which is where we specialize. We don't do anything associated with, chat window products. Everything is developer oriented, where folks are buying tokens for use cases like software development or agent production and orchestration, or just in production workloads, like a chatbot, for instance. So our ICP are these native AI companies, in particular, I would say regulated industry, and companies that are very focused around privacy and security, really care tremendously about what we're doing. So this could be healthcare, for example,
mm.
with respect to the BAA chain. This could be the SOC 2 requirements, for many enterprise companies, but in particular, to meet the needs of financial services companies, legal tech, insurance. Those kinds of industries in particular are of real interest to us.
That makes me think about my own use case where I had AI calling the insurance company. Of course, it's using patient information to authenticate itself with the insurance rep. Even after that authentication, the insurance reps can be skeptical because they just, if they do notice that it is in AI, they will not feel as comfortable. They'll be more likely to hang up, right? What kind of security does Concentrate offer, or what kind of authentication does it offer in order to kind of shore up that trust with the AI as it's calling the insurance company?
Yeah, absolutely. The topic of identity with respect to agentic use is a big deal. We think a lot about identity security. My last company, Deduce, was in the identity security space. We were focused on delineating between real people and bots, and then very, very early, maybe probably the earliest in deciphering whether an agent was a proper agent. Is this Brendan's agent? Is this Ari's agent? Or is this an unlawful agent? So, a lot of those learnings have carried over. We're not a cybersecurity company at Concentrate, but in your particular use case and with respect to the healthcare industry at large, the AI models are substantially less effective if you can't push PHI through them. If you want to push PHI through them, you've got to have proper BAAs in place. That's something that we specifically afford our customers. And then you have to have guardrails in place for, what's appropriate disclosure, what's not appropriate. Every workflow is different between payers and providers, and folks who are even more acquainted with the healthcare industry understand that, that drill. So it varies use case to use case. But I think I think the important thing here is Concentrate's really focused on the specific use cases and on making sure that from a customer success perspective, we really meet the needs of the customer and we choose the right model for each of those use cases through the diagnostics that we have, and then we secure them and we govern them and we make sure that they don't overspend and we make sure, that they don't leak data, et cetera, et cetera. So, those are the things we're working on all day.
Yeah, no, that's a very fascinating area. Choosing like figure out what is the best, what is the optimal model to choose. 'Cause a lot of people, even if they didn't have an auto selector like this, they wouldn't necessarily know what's the best model to use. And so, how do you guys? Do you mind walking through like a specific example of the scenario how a model would be chosen for a given use case?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, there's so many specific use cases. We'll stay a little bit generic here,
Sure.
but let's start in the following way, right? Like, there's no need to send a $1 question to a $100 model,
Right.
right? Probably agree on that. And conversely, if you had a $100 question, it probably wouldn't be right to send it to a dollar model,
Yeah.
right? That wouldn't be right either. And so you're looking for a Goldilocks solution. You're looking for the model that does really good work, against all of the parameters. And part of those, the parameters might be latency, how fast it is, how quickly the answer comes back, right? If you have a real-time application, that's really critical. It could be cost, right? You might have a really important workflow, but you can only answer questions for a certain price and not over that price. And so you're
Mm,
looking for the best intelligence that meets a cost criteria because your unit economics have to be such that you can still make money, right? Some questions are fact based, right? What is the capital of France? Does not have to be answered at the frontier, right?
right.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
An incredibly cheap model can answer that question. And so when you look at the workflows for very specific industries, again, healthcare, payer versus provider, there are some things that are mission critical, some things that are, real time, some things that are batch, some things, that are those $100 questions, right? And so you use our diagnostics to really rip through all of the different models and how they perform under pressure and how they perform at scale to make these trade-off considerations, right? If cost is no exercise, most folks would always prefer the state-of-the-art frontier model, Fable, for example, right? But that's $10 in and $50 out
Yeah.
right now. And it's not the solution for how many valves does the typical human heart have, right? Not necessary.
Absolutely.
That's an open source. That's an open source question. And by the way, like a generations old open source question that can be had for like almost zero. That's how we think about it. And so routing is a huge part of what we do. And there's two kinds of routing. The first kind of routing that we solve is that is that multi-cloud resiliency routing, which is like, hey, if a particular LLM goes down, we don't want to go down because we have this important chatbot, for example, that's answering patient questions. It can't go down. It's mission critical. No problem. We will move that workload to the next capable cloud that doesn't have extreme latency, that will deliver the identical model, no quantization. You're in great shape, right? You keep going. That's something that Concentrate does uniquely and a great job of, right? The other kind of routing is what we just talked about, which is, here comes a prompt, here comes a question, right? Where should I send it? Should I send it to this super expensive model? Should I send it to the less expensive model? Should I send it to a specialty model, that just handles this particular kind of thing? And that's the routing decision that we make. We're investing heavily in that decision science. And I think we do a pretty good job of it today.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a super interesting area to be in. And as you're switching models, of course, one of the big important factors going into AI these days is having a good context for that model, so that it has all the right information that it can pull from. That it can pull from. When you switch models, is it keeping the same, a same context, whether it's documents or access to a database or whatever it may be?
That depends. If you can keep it in the same cloud, for example. Otherwise, like certainly a memory issue. You're asking technical caching question, and your mileage will vary. Depending on the session, depending upon the model, depending upon the cloud. But that's something that we are spending a lot of time working on as well.
Some customers, and I'm not sure, since you mentioned that a lot of your customers may be developers, but in certain use cases, like for mine, for example, you may want a certain tone when talking to, or a certain conversational style when talking to the insurance reps. Is that something you guys are thinking about, like consistency across switching models in tone, or is it more you guys are focused on the technical side of things with developers, and so it's not as important right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not important. We certainly provide the facilities to developers to establish their own tone, and they can look at the temperature of the model, for example. They can tweak it, but since we're so developer centric, since we're so agent centric, we don't think necessarily about the tonality. It's our customer, the developer, who works for example, a regulated industry company, that's massaging that, through the code that they're writing and through the way that they're interfacing with our API.
Where do you see things going eventually? Do you guys have a vision that you paint for the company? Like a certain grand outcome that you're using to motivate the team, but also genuinely pursuing?
I think the vision here is, to continue to offer super high quality governance and risk mitigation, and compliance tooling for native AI companies, for regulated markets companies, companies who care about privacy and security, because it's not about token maxing. It's really going to be about compliance maxing. You want to be able to use these things safely. Again, so much legislation coming through, that we want to do good in the world. And our way of doing good in the world is to help companies, provide AI driven services that help people save time and money. And that's our mission, to help our customers save time and money in LLM ops, right? They're not getting any more shareholder value by spending tens of hours on the stuff that we have automated already, right? If they're spending all that time, they're not differentiating their products, and
Yeah.
they're not differentiating their products. They're not growing. They're not becoming more valuable. So the vision here is to keep saving our customers a ton of time and money and hassle. And if we're successful at doing that, we'll continue to grow nicely. And then, lots of options available for a company that's executing well.
Yeah, yeah, no, the best kind of service is one that you can just forget about, right? And focus on what you want to focus on. And so you mentioned that there are all these regulations rolling out. You guys have the startup and technical background, so you have that skill set. But when approaching these legal topics, I mean, do you find you have to find a good lawyer that's familiar with these topics, or can are you able to navigate it with your own knowledge?
So we've come from some pretty compliance heavy
Yeah.
industries. It's been part and parcel of what we've done for a long time. Our first hire at Concentrate was a DPO, a data privacy officer that we've worked with last 12 years. So that'll tell you a lot of what you need to know about the orientation of Concentrate, what makes us tick as an organization. I would say, we very closely track this legislation. There are tools out there that make that, that make that rational to do. We've got great lawyers externally. We've got a great one internally. It's just about managing away complexity. If we can abstract away all that complexity for our customers, that's a perfect example of saving them time and money, right? Our customers don't want to be fined. Our customers don't want to be, quote, named and shamed, right? They don't want to be on the receiving end of nasty grams, for example. Like many folks, if the great state of New Jersey has something to say about, how companies comport themselves online with respect to AI use, the next week it'll be the great state of what, Maine or New Mexico. And it's like playing whack-a-mole, doing that with two hands, which is more drumming, but like you get the idea. Like it's like playing whack-a-mole out there for companies, which is the opposite of spending their time and their precious energy creating differentiation and therefore shareholder value. Like, we'll handle it, right? We've built immutable audit trails. We've got easy ways to present the evidence and export that evidence with proper integrations to be able to do so. We've got the identity security in place, right? We've got the roles-based access controls, et cetera, right? You can get ZDR endpoints, zero data retention endpoints through us, through over 7 providers. I can't remember, 7 or 8. So like we've done sort of the dirty hard work
Yeah.
to make it available. And this platform is free for our customers, right? They could stitch together 6 or 7 point solutions and pay for them and then pay for someone to manage them, or they could just buy their LLM tokens through us and get the platform for free. And so, many are choosing to get it for free and just buy their tokens through us.
That's an interesting model. So let me see if I have that correctly. So your customers can use your or sign up for your platform for free, but then where the cost comes in is just actually using up tokens. And what do you guys charge, like a small fee with the like on top of the model providers cost?
That's exactly right. They can use the platform for free, and then they buy the tokens. And actually the tokens are the same exact price as if they went direct. They're buying the tokens for face value,
Okay, wow.
if you will. We're able to make a little bit on each one of those purchases, based on the deals we have in place with the suppliers.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a very clever way to do it. So you guys made a deal with suppliers because you're bringing in a lot of business to basically allow you to charge at face value and then collect the difference from the money saved on buying bulk.
Yeah, and that way the value proposition is super crystal clear
Yeah, right.
for our customers. It's, they don't spend a penny more than they would if they went directly, but they get tremendous amounts of value from us and lots and lots of time savings.
Yeah, no, it's a great point because a lot of, I mean, everyone knows that if you talk to a salesperson, they're trying to sell you on it, and it matters how convincing what they say is, and if they show you a clear value proposition, we're getting we're buying these tokens in bulk, which allows you guys to get savings. It's a lot more convincing for the customer to believe your pitch if there's a clear value saving there.
It's really just about, I mean, they're buying them at face value. So they're,
Right.
let's say they want to use six model families, for example. Do they want 6 bills or do they want a unified bill?
That's a good selling point too. Yeah.
That's hours of reconciliation in and of itself.
Absolutely. And maybe we've already covered it, but what do you feel keeps your product at the forefront versus competitors? Is it keeping up with that regulation? Is it the cost management, all tying all this together? Is there anything in particular, or is it just a bundle of different things that keep you guys keep a good competitive moat around your guys' products?
It's all of the above. I mean, We offer, again, I hate to beat this stick, but
No problem.
it's just about time and ultimately money savings. If you have to stitch together 6 or 7 point solutions to do this, and then you have to maintain all of those integrations as they change, which they do it seemingly on a weekly basis, and
Yeah.
then you have to hire someone to manage all of that. That is a humongous amount of time lost and wasted money and hassle, right? Wouldn't you rather take all of that and put it into building something that's productive? Wouldn't you rather put that into selling, for example, producing revenue? So, keeps us in front of customers. The thing that, wins hearts and minds for us is very simple. This is a blocking and tackling business, or picks and shovels, as people like to say. People like to work with us because we make their lives substantially easier. That's it.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more clear to me what you mentioned before, bundling together these supply side because that's what you guys are doing. You're aggregating all the token providers, the model providers together in one place, and then that creates value in a number of ways for customers. So it makes sense. I guess you've started multiple companies in New York City now. How's that been? I mean, of course, New York has a very strong startup atmosphere. I feel these days. It's not quite on the same level, I guess, as Silicon Valley, but there's so many other industries here that you can kind of get domain knowledge in and deploy technology into that. I feel like that does give it some advantage.
I've been building startups in the New York City ecosystem for over 20 years. It gets better and better and better. A bunch of folks would argue that San Francisco is the epicenter of all things AI. It's a place I'm in a couple times a month, right? So no lack of connectivity there. But I really love working in New York City. I love living in New York City. It's a place my family has called home for a long time, where my kids go to school, where we've got a great life. And I think it's a very diversified startup ecosystem.
Yeah.
There's an incredible amount of talent here. It's certainly multidimensional. The reality is, if you sit at a lunch table in San Francisco, you can certainly overhear conversations about, which companies have raised money,
Uh,
and exited. And, that can happen in New York as well, but you're also likely to hear about, that which is cultural, or, even crazy stuff like real estate or sports, or politics, or a variety of other goings on. So, I value both ecosystems. I really, really do. I'm happy to live here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I meet so many New York City entrepreneurs, and I've wondered myself about how to balance staying in New York and working with, of course, all the investors or many of the investors and people on the cutting edge are in San Francisco. How do you think New York entrepreneurs should manage that? Should they go say if they're in the early stages, should they go, I don't know, every 2 months to San Francisco, or should they not worry about that until, like, say they need to they're doing a funding round or something.
I always say, sort of like, travel when you need to.
Yeah,
It's not necessary all the time. I have a regular need. There are great investors in New York, and there's great investors in San Francisco, and there's great investors in between.
yeah,
The San Francisco ecosystem for investors is very rich and very fabulous. Just people who've had tremendous amounts of success, but the same can be said about New York. If you measure on volume of exits and, total exit value, I'm sure the nod goes to San
right.
Francisco right now. But, New York is terrific. I travel because I need to, and it's easy to, and I get value out of one-on-one meetings in person. There's really no substitute for meeting people in person, but not everyone has that need or that requirement.
And since you are in the CEO role, I was curious what does make it a very effective CEO? Like what is it day to day or strategically that you focus on that allows you to execute well?
I think having a constant rapport with the people you get a chance to call your teammates, and your customers and your suppliers and partners and investors is the key to it. And and the technology is there such that you can really pull insights out of all of those conversations to better steer the business. But I think it's about learning to trust your instruments and being aware of everything going on around you. And then never forgetting that you're in a people business,
Mhm.
right? Talk about AI until the cows come home, but we still need people to build businesses and to, sell to other companies and to create partnerships, right? This is still about people. It will continue to be about people. Maybe it's about fewer people, and maybe those people are better suited to the task, but it's still about people.
Yeah, as someone who hosts networking events, I agree. I've learned that. I wish I had started hosting networking events back in college. That would have it would have helped me a lot. You definitely you can yeah, you're never going to be the expert in everything, of course, and you can either try to be, I don't know, the best at in a certain discipline, or you can know many people that are the best in many disciplines, right? And that's going to be to your advantage.
Yeah. By the way, I think I gravitate towards people who are community organizers and bring people together. One of our co-founders, Zach Moscow, who runs Go to Market here, did that work in college. He continues to do that work, and he's just a tremendous connector. And from a go to market perspective, it's a terrific skill set.
And one of the questions that I see when attendees at my event sign up, they fill out some information, including what their biggest pain points are, what they're looking for, and a lot of people that are starting companies are looking for investors. But when should they really look for investors? Should they try to get revenue started first to a certain degree, or get a certain number of customers and then look, or at what point is it good to think about investment?
Yeah, it's tough advice to give because it really depends on, if it's the entrepreneur's first company, or if they've been successful previously. There's different rules for those different categories. Generally speaking, investors like to see some traction. They like to see some unfair advantages. They like to see that they can pour capital on top of a pilot light that's going and really help to grow revenues. It's different depending upon who you're talking to. There's no one size fits all rule, but generally speaking, it's exactly what you can read out there, or hear in a variety of podcasts, including your own. I think investors are looking for novel ideas that are gaining traction early on with a really terrific founder, or set of co-founders, who seem like the right human beings for the job.
Absolutely. Just going back a bit to the AI selection industry, or the AI management industry, like being down on the ground, working with customers every day. Where do you see the industry going? Is it heading in a certain direction clearly, or are things moving so quickly that it's hard to tell?
I don't think it's that hard to tell. I think LLM orchestration is going to be the norm and not the exception. I think routing is going to be the norm and not the exception. I think we're in early days, but multi-cloud resiliency is, I think, going to be critical. I think folks are coming around to not wanting to send the dollar question to the $100 model, and conversely, not send the $100 question to the dollar model where the efficacy won't be on point. I think, these trends will continue along with compliance maxing, as we call them.
Mm,
Say we're in the first or second inning of baseball for AI commercialization. In the third inning, this is where compliance really kicks in, because everyone goes like, okay, we're doing it. We're doing the thing. Like, we built it. But now we want to sell to bigger companies. We want enterprises to buy our products. Oh no. Like, they're asking us to be buttoned up.
yeah,
How do we do that? Right. And it's like, hey, let's get you buttoned up now. Right. So you don't have to retrofit. Retrofitting is harder. Let's get you buttoned up now. I think that's going to be the trend.
that makes sense. I mean, we're definitely at that point where I see many large corporations. They've started to really want to dive into AI, and of course healthcare, finance. They need it to be to fit the regulatory environment.
You bet.
And yeah, two last questions I like to ask. First, what's the biggest challenge that you faced in this latest startup? Something that the audience could learn from?
I think it's the same in every startup. You want to put the best players you can possibly find and afford
Uh,
on the field, and so the challenge is no different than it was 20 years ago. It's around talent. It's around finding amazing people,
uh,
that share your passion and share your mission and want to hustle, towards building a really big, important, and valuable company for all stakeholders. That's something that hasn't changed. That remains a challenge, to find the great ones. I'm sure it's relatable to everybody who's building a startup.
and just a quick follow-up on that, any tips to finding that great talent? Is it just about networking or any strategy that you use?
Just like every other form of sales, it's about hustle. It's about
Yeah.
turning over rock.
And then, last question, and this is sort of similar to the previous one, but if there's anything that could save an entrepreneur, like months or years, some pitfall that you saw, some time saving strategy. Just yeah, if you mind explaining that and how an early startup founder could utilize that to save themselves a lot of time.
There's a ton, and you know, I don't know that I'm the Maria or Marie Kondo of time savings. For me, it's about time on task. So whatever time I wind up saving with a bunch of different tips and tricks, I usually absorb with, a list of things that have to get done. I'm a big fan of specific tools. I like Plod for in-person meetings. I like Granola a whole heck of a lot for rationalizing meetings and pulling insights out of meetings. I think Zapier has great connective tissue. I could go on and on about a variety of different tools. Those are some of the things that save me hours a day.
Yeah, no, Zapier is one that I've heard a lot about. I have some of my own automations. I haven't used Zapier yet, but I'll have to definitely set up some workflows with that. Thank you so much, Ari, for coming on the podcast. It's been fascinating to hear your story, what you're working on, the products that you're building, and then also learn from a serial entrepreneur, which that's I'm always fascinated by that because of course it must be some common thing that you figured out to make things work one after another. So it's a pleasure to learn from you.
Brendan, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.